in those days of repentance very seriously. But there are other books as well, two other books you might notice. One is called the Book of the Lost, sometimes referred to as Rashim. The people who were written in this book at trumpets are forever sealed, lost on the day of Rosh Hashanah. The last book, the third book, is for those who have remained in ignorance. Perhaps they've had not the opportunity to hear the truth. You know, I talked to some folk in the church today, and I begin talking about Jacob's trouble, or the time of trouble, or some of these things that are familiar to Adventists for years. They're not sure what I'm talking about, or just when it will be, or how long it will last, or why it's there, or anything about it. You know, kind of in ignorance. This book is called, as best as described in English, a book of intermediates. And that's as good a name for it as any. It's basically, according to Jewish literature, for the common people. Common can apply to Gentiles. They are not fully judged, saved or lost on the first day of trumpets. This is a group that's not the saved, not the lost. Perhaps it's this time that Ellen White refers to in Review and Herald, July 5, 1906. Notice the quote. Speaking of God, His hand is still stretched out to some while the door is closed to those who would not enter. The fact that a time of probation is still open to some folk proves the fact that probation has not yet closed on all the world. That happens later at the Day of Atonement. It only closes on those who have had previous opportunity to know the truth, but didn't love it. However, those in the book of righteous are sealed, and those in the book of wicked are also sealed. I think Paul is writing of this book of Rashim in 2 Thessalonians. In the 2nd chapter, in the 10th verse, he's talking about them with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. Now, this is clearly in reference to those who had the truth, but simply didn't love it. For this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie. Let's take a look at our chart again for a moment and notice the highlighted word under trumpets, where it says Yamim Noraim. Do you see that? Yamim Noraim. Translated into English, the days of awe. You can see why the period of trumpets is called exactly that, day for awe. Salvation is already closed for some, and soon to close on the entire world at the very next feast. Now, the greeting during that time is written underneath. Do you see it on the chart? May you be sealed until the day of redemption. Oh, this is more important. Not on the day of redemption, not at the day of redemption. Oh, no. May you be sealed until the day of redemption. In other words, the day of trumpets does parallel the loud cry. As we're preaching the final message on the earth and explaining the mark of the beast and the message of the fourth angel and all of these things to people who are in confusion and wanting to know and looking to us for help, when we're explaining all these things, as a person accepts the message, he's sealed for salvation. As a person rejects the message, he's sealed for loss. And it all takes place, that saving and loss and finality, on the Day of Atonement. May you be sealed until that time is the message given during the Day of Trumpets. Actually, the beginning of the Feast of Trumpets could mark a very good time for the passing of religious legislation against the saints, and even the completion of the judgment against Laodicea. My, what an overwhelming surprise that would be, to find the church judged when the legislation is passed. And the 144,000 begin teaching people truth, of those who accept saved, those who reject lost. Especially would it be horrendous if this truth is discovered at that time by some who have not studied the issues, and had not warned their brothers and sisters, especially as if ministers have not sounded the alarm, but simply placated their congregation with nice words. Do you remember the text from Ezekiel? Blood will be required at the watchman's hand. I'm going to read another text now, and I want you to notice the words of separation taking place between those who are sealed saved and those who are sealed lost, and that it takes place after religious legislation. And in this text, I want you to notice words like phrases of gold versus dross, chaff versus wheat, false versus true. Notice the separation. This is from 5 Testimonies, page 81. The time is not far distant when the test will come to every soul. Now notice the test. The mark of the beast will be urged upon us. Those who have step by step yielded to worldly demands and conformed to worldly customs will not find it a hard matter to yield to the powers that be, rather than subject themselves to derision, insult, threatened imprisonment, and death. The contest is between the commandments of God and the commandments of men. Now notice, in this time, the gold will be separated from the dross. Where? In the church. When does the separation begin? She says, when the mark is urged upon us. Now this has to follow religious legislation, doesn't it? They can't urge the mark on it if there's been no legislation. The separation can't take place until after a judgment is determined either. They have to, the angels have to know who is who before the separation takes place, who's to be separated. So we can see clearly that a judgment has taken place with religious legislation, then comes a separation. And notice another quotation. True godliness will be clearly distinguished from the appearance and tinsel of it. Many a star that we have admired for its brilliancy will then go out in darkness. Chaff like a cloud will be borne away on the wind, even from places where we can only see floors of rich wheat. All who assume the ornaments of the sanctuary, but are not clothed with Christ's righteousness, appear in the shame of their own nakedness. Naturally, the separation follows their judgment. But is she even very clear on when that judgment takes place? Well, we'll take a break, and we'll come back and even make that more clear than before. Let's do rest for a few moments. Take a little break. We'll be right back. We were about to see another evidence that the church may well be judged at the time of trumpets, just before the time of trouble regarding religious legislation. Let's read it again, only this time from 5T 2:16. She asked, "What are you doing, brethren, in the great work of preparation? Those who are uniting with the world are receiving the worldly mold." In other words, their choice of food and dress and ornaments and entertainment and drinks and whatever, they're making choices if they're going the worldly way. She says, and they are preparing for the mark of the beast. Those who are distrustful of self, who are humbling themselves before God, sounds like Teshuva to me, and purifying their souls by obeying the truth, these are receiving the heavenly mold and preparing for the seal of God in their forehead.